again, you have a little box sitting behind you there, and you take it out of the box and put the pads on your skin where you're trying to activate the muscles. In other words, where you're trying to milk the cow backwards to move that swelling, that congestion out of the area. And you turn it on and you follow a very simple rule: use your brain, never cause pain. And it's that easy. People say, well, what else do I have to know? That's it. You got it. Use your brain, never cause pain.
What if I told you that everything you thought you knew about recovery, icing, resting, and even the way you handle soreness was actually slowing you down and holding you back? Today, we are exposing the biggest recovery myths in baseball and revealing the secrets that major leaguers use to stay on the field, perform at their peak, and outlast the competition. With us today is a man with over 50 years of experience in the recovery game, and he's here to give us an education on what we should be doing differently in order to stay on the field. It is a pleasure to welcome to the show Gary Reinl from Marc Pro. Gary, what's going on, man?
I'm happy to be here. I
Love it.
appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Absolutely. So we talk a lot on the Nine Hole podcast and with the Nine Hole brand about owning the mental game. I don't think there's enough energy directed at the recovery game. I think the way that we were taught when we were young, maybe ice in the elbow, certain rice techniques, right? Rest, ice, compression, elevation. Man, I've heard so much about ice and stim as I got older, and it's like, man, I'm not necessarily sure what is best anymore. When we go through minor leagues, we are just told what to do from our trainers, and we fully buy in, right? We don't necessarily know the whys behind it. I would love to talk about recovery methods and maybe getting to the truth about the right way to recover, the right mindset behind it, and what we need to be doing differently. So for years, athletes have been told to ice sore muscles after competition, after a game, when they have some downtime. Why is that one of the biggest mistakes that they can make, in your opinion?
Well, I'd rather not give you my opinion. I'd rather state facts.
I love it.
So
Let's do
the
it.
reason that it's not a good idea, or certainly not the best idea, is it literally slows down the recovery process. In fact, it traps the waste, the Rice protocol, traps the waste in and around the damaged site and prevents the natural flow of oxygen and supplies. Very simply stated is when you rest, you slow down vascular and lymphatic flow. When you make it cold, you slow it down more. When you compress it, you can all but stop it if you chose to. That's called a tourniquet. Clearly, it slows it down even more. And elevation, if in fact it helps in one direction, which I don't believe that it does, but if it helped in one direction, by design, it would hurt in the other direction. So at the very least, you have trapped the waste in and around the damaged site and prevented the natural flow of oxygen and supplies. Now, I've asked thousands of elite athletic trainers, physical therapists, sports medicine doctors, do you think it's a good idea to trap the waste in and around the damaged site and prevent the natural flow of oxygen and supplies? To date, not a single person has ever said yes.
Okay. So that makes sense. So most players think that rice, right, the rest, ice, compression, elevation, they think it's the best way of recovering. So what is the danger of recovering without the proper recovery? Like what is the danger of just not doing anything and going about it the right way? Or can we build that up over time, man? Like run me through that.
Well, if you were going to do nothing, that would be better than the Rice protocol.
Really?
So if you did nothing, that will produce a better result than doing the Rice protocol. And some people every once in a while will ask me, well, who says? Well, first of all, I wrote the book Ice, the Illusionary Treatment Option 14 years ago, and over 1 million people have heard my anti-Rice message. Now, with that said, the doctor who made up the Rice protocol, Dr. Gabe Merkin, Harvard doc, after he read my book, he publicly recanted, said I made this up in my 1978 sports medicine book, meaning the Rice protocol. I made this up. Research has clearly shown up as wrong. Don't do it. It delays healing. and then gives a specific reference to the fact that it actually causes additional damage. Now, if that isn't enough to make you at least pause and say, wait a minute, the guy who made this up, the most recognized, referenced, recommended protocol in Western medicine, not only recanted, but then wrote the foreword to the book that took down his legacy. That's my book, Ice, the Illusionary Treatment Option.
I love it, man. So we've kind of highlighted a little bit, set the foundation about what the traditional recovery methods might have looked like and why it might not be the best way to go about it. Let's dive into the right way to recover and perform at a high level, right? So the best ability, in my opinion, is availability. We want to make sure we're staying on the baseball field. If you could completely rewire how young baseball players approach recovery, how they go about their business of recovering, what's the one thing they should start doing today?
That's a great question.
Appreciate
The
that.
one thing they should start doing immediately is, if we started over and there was no such thing, we had never conversation of recovery, we would look and say, why am I not recovering? What's causing me to still be sore 3 days later? And then you could pretty quickly find out that a lack of movement, and how the body heals is via circulation. So you bring good stuff in, take bad stuff out. If you remember when you were young, and not that long ago for you, a lot longer ago for me, but I can remember very well, whenever anything happened, you jammed your thumb, you turned your ankle, you bumped your knee, whatever, the coach would say, walk it off. Don't sit still. Keep moving. It'll tighten up.
Yeah.
Okay, that advice is from the beginning of time. That's not 1960. That's forever that happened. We always walked it off. Then when Dr. Merkin made up the Rice Protocol in 78, that's when we started sitting still and messing up the system. So the one thing I would recommend that you do is understand what facilitates recovery. That's movement, muscle activation without fatigue. Now, you don't do muscle activation with fatigue, because that's just going to make you more tired and need more time for recovery. So the trick is to have enough muscle activation to bring in nourishment and flush out waste without fatiguing the muscles that are involved.
Bring in nourishment, flush out waste. So this kind of brings me back a little bit to Dr. Herring in Seattle. When I was coming up through the minor leagues, I broke my back. So my L5 on either side of the spine, pars fracture, and then a clean break, man. 22 years old at the time, and I'm not sure if I need to get back surgery or not, but a 22-year-old getting back surgery, that's not a recipe for success, right? I don't know what the statistics say, but I did not want to get back surgery. Wasn't sure what was going to happen. I remember the plan was to like increase blood flow and circulation through my spine. I guess it was in a pretty good area where there was good blood flow there, man. And they were going to try to maximize that, and I was going to heal and rebuild, man. And I remember that was kind of the idea behind it, and I ended up being fortunate enough to get back on the field shortly thereafter. You know what I mean?
Oh, I do. And the little add to what you just said, and they may not have said it back in those days, but now nearly everyone who's informed would say this. It's the good stuff in and the bad stuff out. So it isn't just increasing circulation in, you must also increase circulation out. And I'd say it like this. We all know the word swelling. And swelling is one of those words that kind of gets mixed up and interchanged with the idea of inflammation. And I'm going to blame it on the pharmaceutical industry. Who should take credit, I don't know, but I'll blame it on them. They've convinced people that inflammation is a bad thing, when in fact inflammation is actually phase one of three phases of healing. It's inflammation, repair, and remodel. So you need inflammation. You can have inflammation without healing, but never healing without inflammation. So it's like, well, I thought I was supposed to block inflammation. No. What happened was they've interchanged the two words, inflammation and swelling. And swelling isn't a good or a bad thing. It's merely the accumulation of waste at the end of the inflammatory cycle that you have not yet removed. Now, that's a really simple idea, but you say, well, wait a minute, so isn't swelling bad? No, swelling is not a good or a bad thing. It is merely the accumulation of waste. at the end of the inflammatory cycle that you have not yet removed. Now, how do you remove it? Because we said good stuff in, bad stuff out. So how do you get it out? There's only one way out. It's via the passive lymphatic system. And the lymphatic system is a one-way system. It's kind of like a garbage disposal. You push the button on the garbage disposal and the stuff goes down the drain. The water's all clear and everything's good. Well, with your lymphatic system, it requires, in effect, that button to be pushed. And that's for the muscle to contract around the vessel that then pushes the waste up a chamber. The empty chamber now has negative pressure, pulls waste out of the interstitial space. Negative pressure fills the space and pumps it up. In fact, it's like milking a cow backwards. So if you just think about it real simple, it's I've got this passive lymphatic system that only goes one direction that doesn't work unless I, in effect, walk it off. You've got to activate the muscles in and around the congested area to move the swelling. Move the swelling and the rest goes on automatic pilot to heal. Leave the swelling there and you delay everything.
Dang, man.
And how many
The
times did you hear growing up, by the way, that once the swelling's gone, you're going to feel better? Have you, I mean,
yeah,
how many hundreds of times you heard that comment? Well, why not then say, which I never did, by the way, back in the 60s when I played, I never said, hey, well, what moves it along? How do I get it out? Well, how you get it out is via muscle activation. And that muscle activation, in effect, is walking it off. And as you said in the beginning of the piece, and I actually see behind you is a Marc Pro machine,
that's
the
right.
Marc Pro machine, in effect, is electronically walking it off. Except for walking it off, it involves your whole body. So it's your right ankle, but you got to walk. How about if I could just do your right ankle? Well, that's what you can do with electronic walking it off, the Marc Pro, is that you can walk it off electronically and be point specific and not have to involve your whole body. I don't ever want to recover and waste energy in the process of recovering.
Okay.
Marc
So
Pro doesn't waste energy.
so is this Marc Pro is in every single like professional clubhouse that I've ever been in. And it's big time, man. Big time, big time, big time. Worked for me. Is this the same idea as this ice and stim? We dove into the ice is not a great thing, but is this the stim idea, right? Is this the all encompassing stim?
Well, it's part of the STEM idea. STEM's a very big category. There are all different kinds of ways of sending the electricity in. I'll remind you of one. Hopefully, you've never done this, but you probably know about it. If you stick a screwdriver into a light socket, it'll give you electricity into your skin,
I know about
and
it. Yeah, yeah.
and you won't like how that feels, by the way.
Yeah.
So don't do that. But there's all kinds of ways of delivering electricity into the muscle. Some are comfortable, and like that are very uncomfortable. I was once reminded, giving a lecture at a university, oh, you mean like the electric chair? Like, well, yeah, that's another way of sending electricity into the body. And so we have to find a way not just to give stim or electrical stimulation, which is what e-stim is. You have to do it comfortably and without fatiguing the muscle, and it's got to be reasonably convenient. If it's not reasonably convenient and comfortable, you're not going to do it.
Makes
Okay,
sense.
well, again, you have a little box sitting behind you there, and you take it out of the box and put the pads on your skin where you're trying to activate the muscles. In other words, where you're trying to milk the cow backwards and move that swelling, that congestion out of the area. And you turn it on and you follow a very simple rule: use your brain, never cause pain. And it's that easy. People say, well, what else do I have to know? That's it. You got it. Use your brain, never cause pain. It's a recovery technique, not a training technique. If you remember when you go to the gym, you're trying to be uncomfortable for a benefit tomorrow.
Yeah,
It's supposed to be uncomfortable. That's a training technique. This is a recovery technique. Nothing's ever uncomfortable. Use your brain, never cause pain.
I like that, man. I'm not gonna forget that. Um, so in we're diving now into this elite recovery, what we should be doing, what we can be doing to stay on the field. Obviously, the walking it off factor is huge. It's going to accelerate muscle repair. Man, what does an elite recovery routine look like?
It's individualized. Uh, Never knowing how much damage there was before we started. So let's say you came to me and as a pitcher, you say, well, how long do I use it for? Well, I have to know how much damage you have, how efficient you are, and what position you'll be in while you're doing it. So let's take it pretty easy. You threw 80 pitches. Okay, so we threw 80 pitches. All right, great. Now we know how many pitches you threw. Now, how efficient are you? Well, are you 3% body fat or are you 30% body fat? Because fat will inhibit my signal. And it's not going to work as well on someone who's 30% body fat compared to someone who's 3%. It'll still work, but it will take longer. And then what position will you be in? Will you be lying comfortably on a lazy boy chair, fully reclined and completely relaxed with your body parts in the optimal position? In other words, if you were the pitcher and it was your arm, I'd have your arm across your torso, fingers aiming towards the opposite hip bone, soft pillow, not a hard one. We don't want to compress the vessels, but a soft pillow between your arm and your torso. Turn the machine on, use your brain, never cause pain, activate as much muscle as possible. The more fiber you attract, the less time it takes to accomplish a given task. So now we got, oh, okay, so I need to know how I need to know how much damage there is, how efficient you are, and what position you're going to be in while you're doing it. Now, once I know that, then I can tell you how long I think it'll take. But until you know that, you don't know the answer to the question. And I often warn people if you come across anyone who tells you, oh, you need 20 minutes, or they have a pre-programmed device that goes for 20 minutes. Okay, well, there's no way that can be right. And if you think about it, how could any two people's experience even be the same 2 days in a row?
Mm.
You know what did you drink? What did you eat? What did you wear? You hear all these recovery things out there. There's recovery drinks and recovery bars and recovery shirts and recovery socks, and that's very interesting. But you can drink anything you want to drink. You can eat anything you want to eat. You can wear anything you want to wear. But until you can decongest the area in and around the damaged site and rebuild the related vascular network, all your results are compromised. So you've got to walk it off up front.
Mm.
Remember the old stories of the guys running the poles?
Yeah.
Okay, that was a great idea, but let's think this through. They were trying to facilitate recovery in their arm and shoulder, and they're running. Now, can you think of a more inefficient way of doing it? It's like, well, but that was it. That's how they did it. They knew what they were trying to do, but they just didn't have a very good way of doing it. Now we do.
Hmm. I love that right there. I love that. I still love the idea of walking it off. I still have my head wrapped around the reverse milking the cow idea, man. If you guys want to recover the right way, use code the9hole for 10% off your Marc Pro game changing stuff. So Gary, um, when we talk about bad recovery, we talk about taking time away from being on the field. I had mentioned before the best ability is availability. I had pride, took pride in my health, getting good sleep, watching what I took, put in my body, man, um, hydration, vitamins, all that good stuff. How does poor recovery contribute to overuse injuries? So, like my injury was an overuse injury, my lower back injury. How does poor recovery contribute to that stuff, and how can players prevent that before it's too late, before you break your back?
Well, again, it's a very individual question with all the factors that will accumulate to that one individual to the point where they have a problem. But I believe if you walked it backwards and said, well, okay, give me something like really general. Well, what general is if you aren't recovered, you're going to alter your mechanics. You alter your mechanics, and now
Mm,
you're using your body in ways that is unfamiliar, that are untrained, and you're going to get hurt. So it's really that simple when you're just taking a general answer to the question. And you say, well, so what do I have to do? What you have to do is the muscles that are tired and sore facilitate recovery. And recovery is contingent upon decongesting the area in and around the damaged site and rebuilding the related vascular network. And that's what you've got to do. You've got to get the good stuff in, the bad stuff out. So how are you going to do it? Well, I'm going to run the poles. Okay, well, that won't work very well, but it's better than nothing. I'm going to put an ice bag. I'm going to sit still and put an ice bag tightly wrapped around my arm and stick it up in the air. Now, that's such a bad idea that I think if I invented it right now and it never happened before, and I walked into a training room, say for the major league team, the Dodgers or the Yankees or whatever, and said, "Hey, I got a great idea for your guys after they throw. Let's sit them still and put a bag of ice around their arm, wrap it real tight, and have them stick it up in the air." How long do you think I'd last in the majors if I ever gave that dumb idea?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't think very long, right?
You see the problem right
Yeah, I get it.
now? You made a comment a little bit earlier, but the answer is yes. Players from all 30 major league teams use the Marc Pro. Now, it's not the only thing they do. So let's not get, sometimes people say, "Well, is it the only thing you have to do?" No, it's not the only thing you have to do. There's many things that go on in the rehab and recovery process.
It's a supplement to
It's a
their recovery.
it's a key supplement
Yeah.
too, because I've got you when you look at the area that has been damaged, and it's damaged. There's micro trauma from doing the work, and when you look at the damage, you say, "What's step one?" Well, step one is to get the good stuff in, the bad stuff out. Period. That's step one. How do you do it? Not by sitting still with a bag of ice wrapped tightly around your arm while sticking up in the air. You got to move. You got to walk it off. Okay, so how do I walk it off? Well, you could do some shoulder shrugs and you could wiggle your arms to the side, and I guess you could run the poles and flap your arms while you're doing it. That's a very inefficient, time-consuming way of doing it, and that doesn't work very well at 2 a.m. in your hotel room or on the bus or the plane going back to your home base.
100%. So you've been around the game, the recovery game, 50 plus years, man, and that's fantastic. So you've seen things. We've talked about this rice method. We've talked about wrapping the ice tightly around your arm, sticking it up. I get it. Okay, so these professional athletes, you go into the Yankees clubhouse or the Dodgers, and you try to do this stuff. You might get booed out of the room, right? These guys might think you're crazy. So, what is something else pro athletes understand about the overall recovery game that most young players just completely miss?
Well, they value the body part as the way that they make their living.
Mm.
And when you change the rule, I'll give you an example. It may sound abstract for a second, but I think it'll tie to you. My most satisfied customer ever is not a Major League Baseball player, nor football or hockey or basketball, soccer. No, a concert flutist.
Whoa.
Now, probably if I gave you 100 chances to guess, you wouldn't have guessed that. But now think about what a concert flutist does. They hold the flute in their hand and they practice and practice and practice. Hours a day they practice. And when I got the call originally, they were considering experimental carpal tunnel release. And that means they're going to cut into your skin. I said, that is not experimental. They cut into your skin. We're in the game now, okay? So I asked a very simple question. I said, so at this point in time, give me your specific recovery program post practice. There was none. They were doing nothing. And then the next day they would try to play and it would hurt for the first 15 minutes or so. And then they'd kind of warm up and they'd be able to go. And then they'd stop pretty much when their fingers cramped up again.
Ay.
And I said, okay, this is going to be real easy. Since you're not doing anything right now for recovery, let's try facilitating recovery electronically. So just had them put a pad in the palm of their hand, 2/3 of the way up their forearm, both hands, sit comfortably with a pillow between their arms and their torso, and just pump. Within a month, problem was basically gone. Had them go to a therapist. Actually, I think they went to an athletic trainer and just got some basic muscle strengthening exercises for their forearms and fingers. And you think, well, Who wouldn't be doing that?
Yeah.
Most people don't
As
do
opposed to
that.
surgery. Yeah. Yeah.
Most
Wow.
people don't do it. So now we take a baseball player, and for whatever level they are, whether they're at the perfect game level in the youth baseball or in the majors, how I originally got into baseball to where I started making an impact. I now have a relationship with players or with trainers from all 30 teams. But how I originally got in was uh, a player was falling out of rotation with the old method. In other words, the Rice protocol wasn't working for him.
Mm.
And I was asked, well, what do I think? And I said, well, here's what I think. And this was like 15 years ago, by the way. And I said, tell me what you're doing. They said, well, after he throws, we wrap a bag of ice around his arm and do that for 30 to 45 minutes. If he's still sore tomorrow, we do it again. And I said, well, stop doing that. And they looked at me and said, well, what do you mean? What? I said, well, you just said it's not working. Stop doing that.
Yeah.
And then just began to explain what is the question? What are you trying to do? We're trying to facilitate recovery. Okay, so what's the process to recover? You've got to bring nourishment in and take waste out.
Mm.
So, how does that work? Well, you got to activate the muscles in and around the congested, damaged area. If you do that, you will facilitate recovery so long as you don't fatigue the muscle in the process. That's the key. If you cause muscle fatigue while you're trying to facilitate recovery, you're not going to win. You're going to keep going downhill.
Okay.
So all you had to do is figure out a way, and our technology has been around now for 43 years. And what our technology is able to do is activate the muscle with a significant contraction without fatigue. So if you need it for an hour, and someone else needs it for 30 minutes, you can do either one. You could use it for 5 hours if you want. People do that. Or very often right now when they're playing coast to coast. So, somebody's from the West Coast playing in the East, they'll use it on the whole way back on the plane. They'll fall asleep on the plane and run it for 3 to 5 hours. Now, do you need it for that long? Probably not, but it doesn't hurt anything.
Right.
And if I fatigued the muscle doing it, I would have lasted 1 week in pro sports. Now
That
I
makes
have
sense.
I have I have trainers and teams from all the major leagues, including golf, tennis, cross country, CrossFit, uh, triathletes, motocross people. Who, by the way, you know what happens to motocross people? Much like the concert flutist, they get forearm pump from holding the handlebars of the motorcycle or the motor. I'm not quite sure. They don't call them motorcycles, but whatever the things are called, they ride on
Those bikes.
the bikes.
Those bikes, dude.
And
I
so they
get it.
they have the same problem the concert flutist has as far as the cramping, and same solution. And it wouldn't matter if you were pulling weeds in your backyard or playing in the Super Bowl. It makes no difference to me what made you tired and sore. The recovery process, facilitating the recovery process, is the same thing.
Love it. So it's all making more sense to me. Obviously, I've had experience with Marc Pro. Stuff works, right? Great stuff. Appreciate you letting us kind of run you through the ringer with all these questions, Gary. Last thing I got for you, man. If you had just 60 seconds as a closing to convince every young baseball player listening to change their recovery routine today, what would you say?
I'd say what I said to a mother recently who called me of a young high school baseball pitcher. She said, do you think I should buy a Marc Pro? And I asked her a very simple question. Does your son expect to play beyond high school? Oh, absolutely. Okay. You think he's going to get a scholarship or what's going to happen? Oh, yes, he'll surely get a scholarship. And I said, okay, then you should buy one. And she said, well, that was a fast answer. I said, well, it's easy to understand that. You talk about going to school for free for 4 years, and it's contingent upon how well you can play baseball. And you want to know if you facilitating recovery every time he plays and practices is a good idea? The answer is yes.
Mm.
Now, on the other hand, I told the mom, if you said no, he doesn't really like baseball. He's going to go on and be a poetry major at a liberal arts college, and he's never going to play sports again. I'd say, well, then don't buy him one.
Yeah.
It's that simple. If it matters to you, if performance matters to you in your future, you should have a Marc Pro. If it doesn't matter, well, then you don't really need one. Now, I'm old, by the way. I'm in my 70s, and I
That's not
still,
old.
it feels that way. I can, I can tell you it doesn't feel like 20 anymore. But
I
I
get it.
still run 20s through the mountains where I live. And when I go out and run a 20-mile run, I know I need Marc Pro when I get home, or I'm going to be really sore tomorrow. So I'm still using it, and I still have a good reason to want one. If you have a good reason to want one, and by the way, my golfers, uh, a golfer by the name of Justin James, a long drive world champion. If you follow golf, when he won the world championships, he hit the ball 444 yards.
Dude.
Now, that's I don't even understand. It's over 4 football fields. How's that possible? But Justin calls Marc Pro his secret weapon. And if you want to see that, you can Google Justin James Marc Pro and you can see the interview I did with him. Now, why do you call it a secret weapon? Because Justin would go out and hit some 400 balls a day. And he'd get very sore in his upper thoracic area along his spine muscles. Okay. And they stayed chronically tired and sore. He got a Marc Pro, that problem went away because now he's electronically walking it off the muscles in his upper thoracic area. So it doesn't matter why you're tired and sore. If you did physical work and you're tired and sore, electronically walking it off is a great solution.
Beautiful. I love that. Use code the 9hole for 10% off Marc Pro. I love it, Gary. Man, I appreciate you again being on here, educating us on the correct way to go about our recovery, man. Thank you for the time.
I love being here. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you guys for tuning in. At the end of the day, the best ability is availability. If you're not recovering the right way, you are leaving performance on the table and opening the door for somebody else to take your spot. Take control of your recovery, do what actually works, and give yourself the best chance to dominate every single day. Appreciate you guys. Keep grinding.